Well, let's go to our panel now. In Chicago is Ali Abunimah. He's the co-founder of the pro-Palestinian website, The Electronic Intifada. Tom Gross is in London. He's a Middle East media analyst. And in Washington, D.C. is Debra Shushan. She's the Director of Policy and Government Relations at Americans for Peace Now, an organization with a pro-Israel, pro-peace American Jewish perspective on policy issues. Good to have you all on the program. Tom Gross, when we look at Kushner's plan, tell me why this isn't anything other than a historically illiterate, bad infrastructure and real estate deal.
Well, it's quite the opposite. It's actually the biggest economic aid package since the Marshall Plan. It involves at least $50 billion investment. It involves creating also the infrastructure for a possible future Palestinian state, for good governance and so on, the rule of law and so on. And if you look at other peoples around the world who are like aid, take the worst, like people in Yemen or poor Syrians on the Jordanian-Syrian border, or many other people, they can only dream of such an investment opportunity.
Ali Abunimah.
Well, that's just pie-in-the-sky talking points. The reality is that this effort by the Trump administration is to distract attention. Even if we take it on its own economic terms, it's an effort to distract attention from what actually destroys Palestinian wealth and economy and plunges millions of Palestinians into poverty, and that's Israeli military occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid. And I'll give a very concrete example here. The World Bank has concluded that Israel's military restrictions on Palestinian businesses and farmers in so-called Area C of the West Bank cost the Palestinian GDP 34% of its potential. So simply removing Israel's restrictions on letting Palestinians farm their own land, dig wells on their own land, build businesses on their own land, would be an immediate 34% jump in Palestinian GDP without all this fanfare of aid. The second issue that's incredibly important is one of credibility. We heard Kushner's speech about how much he cares for the Palestinian people. The plan contains quotes like, a healthy economy requires a healthy population, and claiming that there will be all sorts of investments in Palestinian healthcare. Well, let's see what the record is. The record is that when Kushner and the Trump administration came in, the first thing they did was cut off all US aid to Palestinian hospitals in occupied East Jerusalem, and cut off all aid to UNRWA, the UN agency that cares for the very poorest Palestinian
Let me try and interpret that for a second, Ali. So perhaps, right? And again, I don't want to pretend to be their spokesman, but maybe they're saying we don't want to treat you like refugees anymore. We want to do business with you. What do you think?
Well, they are refugees. That's the problem. I mean, millions of Palestinians are refugees and not allowed to return to their native land for one reason alone, which is that they're not Jewish. And that's why when Palestinians say Israel is a racist state or an apartheid state, that's what they mean. The sole reason 2 million people are caged in the Gaza Strip and shot at by snipers if they try to escape or protest is because they're not Jews. If they were Jews, Israel would tear down the fences, tear down the watchtowers, stand down the snipers, and invite them all to return to the lands and villages from which they're expelled. So that's the reality is they are refugees. You can't wish it away. And this is an attempt to go around the reality, to pretend it's something that it's not, and that the Palestinians are just ungrateful and stubborn, and poor little innocent Israel is at no fault.
Debra, are they wasting their time in Bahrain?
Yes and no. They are wasting their time in the sense that I would certainly agree that this is all smoke and mirrors, and frankly, it's embarrassing for the United States government to be engaging in such an utterly amateurish exercise that is divorced from reality. On the other hand, I think we should give credit where credit is due to the Kushner team, the architect of which, in terms of its policies, is really David Friedman, the U.S. ambassador to Israel. They've been incredibly successful in carrying out their agenda as terrible as it is for Palestinians and as terrible as it is for Israel, in terms of those Israelis and those of us diaspora Jews and others who care about Israel and care about its future as a liberal democracy, as a national home for the Jewish people. They've been incredibly successful in the sense that they are helping to put into place the agenda of Israel's right wing and ultra right wing. My fear is that this is an exercise in distraction, and it's an exercise when Kushner calls it, rather than now the deal of the century, it's the opportunity of the century. What he is setting up is the possibility that because Palestinians have already soundly rejected it for very good reasons, some of which were just outlined by Ali in his comments. When Palestinians reject it, it sets up the opportunity for the Trump administration and for Netanyahu and his government to say, look, once again, the Palestinians have not missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And the Trump administration can then say, over to you, Israeli government, you do what you need to do in order to further your interests, in order to maintain your security. We had Prime Minister Netanyahu before the last elections, immediately before, announce his plans to annex the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. And so this, this gives the go-ahead.
Right.
The Trump administration will give the go-ahead, as really Friedman has already done, for that to be put into place. And that's disastrous not only for the Palestinians, but for Israel as well.
So, Tom Gross, there's no appetite from the Palestinians for this. They're actually protesting in the West Bank. They're protesting in Gaza. Might the plan have had more credibility if, in addition to this $50 billion long-term infrastructure project and this vision, the architects, Kushner and his team, also said, you know what, Israel, you have to give up the occupation. The West Bank settlements are not sustainable. That's not a good thing. You need to give up something as well. There's none of that there.
Well, sorry. As I understand it, the Kushner team have said there's going to be the political aspect for the plan. What they're arguing, and let's presume there's going to be a possibility of an independent Palestinian state. You have to set up the infrastructure, the institutions, the economy for such a state to work, so it won't be a failed state on day one. The plan is not only about money, it's also about good governance, good institutions, property rights, the rule of law. A friend of mine who works at the Bank of England, who I spoke to earlier today, said it's one of the most impressive economic plans he's ever seen, and he is not a fan of the Trump administration. So your other guests might want to study this plan a little bit and ask, how on earth does it help the Palestinian people to turn down $50 billion in economic aid? Of course, it's not the end of the matter. But just to turn it down and complain, I mean, there's not another people on earth that wouldn't. I'm talking about another people.
And you mentioned that earlier. Yes. Okay. So let me ask Ali.
We don't need those.
I want to pull out Ali. 1 second. I want to pull out one small part of the plan. Right. So, for example, you look at the document. There's one thing that says $150 million for new solar power facilities in Gaza. They have terrible electricity cuts. Hamas can't keep it together. The PA can't even, pay people's salaries and so on. In and of itself, $150 million for solar power in Gaza, you wouldn't really be against that, would you?
No, of course I wouldn't be against that, but there's a couple of things. First of all, it's a lie that it's $50 billion for the Palestinians. I mean, Tom Gross should read the plan because it claims...
No, it's 50. I didn't say only for the Palestinians, also for some of it's regional.
Okay. Yes,
no, but it's connected to the creation of the Palestinian.
It says $50 billion over 10 years, of which 25 billion would allegedly go to the Palestinians. Over 10 years, of course, first of all, this is unfunded. No one knows where the money will come from. Secondly, that $2.5 billion a year is less than the wealth-destroying effects of Israeli military occupation. So simply ending the occupation, removing Israeli military restrictions, ending Israeli theft and colonization of Palestinian land, ending Israeli restrictions on Palestinian businesses would be worth far more than this pie in the sky. But to answer our host's question, about solar panels. Of course, solar panels would be great. The Israeli army is busy destroying solar panels in the West Bank so that Palestinians can't farm their land. The reason there's an electricity crisis in Gaza is because Israel restricts the amount of fuel coming in as part of its collective punishment of the population in Gaza. Israel restricts spare parts coming in from Gaza for Gaza's only power plant, which Israel has bombed repeatedly. This pie-in-the-sky plan addresses, it doesn't even acknowledge these realities. Again, Tom is trying to present this as, oh, this is a lovely, generous opportunity from Jared Kushner and company who simply want the best for Palestinians while ignoring the reality that the United States, and under the instigation of the Kushner team, has been aggressively supporting all of Israel's attacks on the Palestinian people, all of the wealth destroying, economy destroying, tree destroying, water polluting realities of military occupation. And if we don't talk about that, then what this is a trolling exercise. So at the end of the day, people like Tom and people like Kushner can say, oh, you know, we tried, we did our best, but those stubborn, greedy Palestinians,
Tom, both Debra and Ali have said that essentially, when after all is said and done, this isn't going to work out. And those who are currently sitting in Bahrain can just say, well, we gave it our best, but the Palestinians never want to show up and they don't care. Address that.
First of all, I'm not Jared Kushner, I'm not American. I want the best for the Palestinians. Look, we're living in the reality of the situation. Israel is a strong country. Only yesterday, there was a trilateral meeting of national security advisors with the two superpowers, America and Russia, in Jerusalem with Israel. The reality is that in order to create a better situation for the Palestinians and a Palestinian state, just to boycott talks, and it's not just the Trump administration, over the 8 years of the Obama term, the Obama officials said also the Palestinians Authority barely wanted to talk. What is there to lose by sitting down and engaging and talking? How do you know it's going to be a failed plan if you don't even turn up and you don't even try talking? I mean, what you say pie in the sky, you've used that phrase twice. How exactly do you hope to advance a better situation on the ground for the Palestinian population of Gaza and the West Bank?
Let me ask you a question, Tom.
If you don't, okay, but I'd rather than point scoring asking me questions, I'd rather you reply to that.
No,
okay,
I'd like to ask you a simple question. Do you oppose Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank?
I'm in general for two states. I'm for any people that want
self-determination. That wasn't the question I asked.
You asked me a question. You're going to let me finish, okay? I'm for self-determination of any peoples, okay? I'm also for the right of minorities to live within countries. So if Jews want to live in a future Palestinian state under Palestinian law, I think they should be allowed to live there just as Palestinian Arabs definitely do and should live in Israel. And I would apply that to any state in the world.
Okay,
so
but I don't like ask that question.
Wait.
Israeli settlements are not lawful. They are land theft and against international law. And I asked whether you support or oppose that, and you couldn't answer it. And that's the problem with this discussion.
Actually, I did answer it. First of all, there are legal experts that disagree with that. But broadly speaking, I'm for Palestinian self-determination.
Okay.
If under a peace treaty, in fact, I would say it's healthy in society to allow a minority to live in peace there.
Okay, so Debra, fundamentally, at the heart of this is the requirement of this peace plan that the Palestinians capitulate to a vision that has been created by Netanyahu and Trump. And is that going to be impossible?
Well, of course, the Palestinians will never agree to that. I mean, we don't know what's in this Kushner plan. It's been promised for for the lion's share of 2 years now and put off regularly most of the time with regard to developments on the Israeli political scene, elections, and so forth. But what we do know is that we have a Trump administration that has made absolutely clear its animosity to two states. We have ridiculous interviews in which people like David Friedman say, well, what is a state? Two states mean different things to different people, says Jason Greenblatt. They refuse to acknowledge the reality of occupation, with David Friedman stripping out the word occupation from State Department human rights reports. So I think even though we haven't seen this plan, we have every reason, every basis on which to gauge what it's fundamentally about, that it won't contain anything resembling real and viable statehood for the Palestinian people. And of course, that's been a non-starter. I mean, that is a non-starter. You have the Palestinian Authority, which has continued under Mahmoud Abbas to push for a two-state solution, to desire a two-state solution. You have an Israeli government under Benjamin Netanyahu that has now made very clear that it does not desire that. The Trump administration does not as well. Of course, this is going to be something that the Palestinians reject. And again, it's ultimately not in Israel's interest either. Israel's interest is in living in peace and security with a Palestinian state. And I think it's pretty clear, even though we haven't officially seen this plan, that that's not going to be what's on the table.
Okay, so it's been fascinating talking to all of you. Ali Abunimah, Tom Gross, and Debra Shushan. I've got to move on. Thanks so much.